It's Wednesday, September 21st. He calls them illegal immigrants, so would this make him an illegal governor? We start here. A sheriff in Texas is investigating whether migrants were tricked into boarding a flight.
What was promised to them? What, if anything, did they sign?
What it could mean for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and for cities in Texas looking for help. As Ukraine gives Russia fits, Russia says it'll give Ukrainians ballots.
Putin's in trouble, he's in a corner, and now he's coming out with these kind of tactics to raise the stakes.
Now a sham vote could lead to even more violent battles. And they say they want to save the planet, so they built a mine.
If we want to be energy independent, these are the real questions that we have to ask.
Valuable metals are being unearthed, along with tough questions. From ABC News, this is Start Here. I'm Brad Milkey. Hey, good to be back with you after a couple days off, and let's get right into what has become this ongoing circus involving migrants who really don't have much of a safety net.
They thought they were coming from Texas to Boston.
You feel that they feel lied to, and they feel betrayed.
Remember last week when dozens of migrants showed up on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, and officials who talked to them said these people were utterly confused about how they arrived on this island.
Every one of them has asked when they're starting their job. They were promised jobs, and they were promised immigration papers.
The state of Florida, it was volunteer, offered transport to sanctuary jurisdictions.
First, you had Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida saying this was all his idea. His state recently allocated $12 billion of taxpayer money to relocate migrants that he said wind up in Florida from Texas. So, you might think, why not charter a plane out of Florida? Well, he said, they're too difficult to find.
The problem is we're not seeing mass movements of them into Florida. So you end up with a car with maybe two.
Instead, he flew migrants out of Texas. I'm not sure why he thought they won't just travel from Massachusetts down to Florida now, but forget about that for a second. The bigger issue is this.
And so they had folders, each had a red folder, and in the folder was a brochure to community services. There was a map from the Martha's Vineyard Airport to community services, and that's how they found us.
Some of these migrants say they were lured onto this plane in part with the help of a brochure. Well, that brochure has led to some Democrats calling this straight up human trafficking and has led to a potential criminal investigation. ABC's Maria Villarreal is based in Texas. She's covered the border for years. Maria, let's start with the latest on that particular group of migrants. Could Texas law enforcement actually charge a Florida governor with a crime?
You know, I think it's possible. If you talk to the sheriff in Bexar County, which is the San Antonio area, I've known him for a very long time. I mean, he's dealt with these kind of immigration issues for decades at this point. I think he is the kind of sheriff that doesn't just announce this kind of stuff for the flashiness of it.
We are opening up a case with an investigation with regard to the suspected activities involving the 48 migrants from Venezuela.
There is a concern as to what exactly this group of people was told.
We want to know what was promised to them. What, if anything, did they sign? Did they even understand the document that was put in front of them if they signed something? Or was this strictly a predatory measure, somebody coming and preying upon people that are here minding their own business and are here legally, not bothering a soul, but somebody saw fit to come from another state, hunt them down, prey upon them, and then take advantage of their desperate situation just for the sake of political theater.
If they were lied to about where they were going and what would be on the other end, if they were told that they were going to get something in return for getting on that bus, I think that there would be a possibility of criminal laws being broken here.
Obviously, we believe there's a high possibility that the laws were broken here in the state of Texas in Bexar County. The fact is there may also be some parallel laws being broken on the federal side.
I think even he's not sure exactly what could be possible, but I think the idea that they were potentially lied to when they were getting on the bus, or they were kind of persuaded to get on the bus with the promise of something else down the road, that to him is enough to dig deeper.
Right, and apparently this brochure listed benefits that apply to certain refugees. Well, those benefits would not extend to these folks. They're under completely different rules. There's also the premise of a federal class action lawsuit that's been filed on behalf of these migrants. And Maria, what I find interesting is If you talk to immigration experts, they'll say, yes, these people are being treated like pawns. Yes, they're being sent not to a place with homeless facilities, but like to a politician's house for a photo op. And yet those same experts will say, make no mistake, there really is a crisis at the border. Like these border cities might need help moving people. Can both things be true?
You know, that's absolutely correct, Brad. I mean, listen, I've been covering immigration for well over a decade. Immigration issues along the border is not new. What is new is this way that they are being used, this particular issue by politicians.
And so I figured if Joe Biden will not come to the border, we will take the border to Joe Biden.
What's really interesting about the situation is that, you know, we've gotten word from our contacts on the border that while they are busing in El Paso, you know, the city is busing in El Paso, while the politicians are busing, you know, on the flip side of it, so are the feds. You know, they also have to move these migrants out of the area, and they're not being as vocal about it.
They themselves have been putting these migrants on buses to San Antonio. So I said, I got a better idea. As opposed to busing these people to San Antonio, let's continue the ride all the way to Washington, D.C.
They talk about having to transfer migrants from one facility to another. Well, so basically you are busing or flying migrants out of a heavily congested border area to another part of the country so you can process them there and then let them go.
On the border, why is the border more overwhelmed under your watch, Mr. President?
Because there are 3 countries that are never happened. There are fewer immigrants coming from Central America and from Mexico.
We've heard a number of our colleagues with ABC News press the Biden administration about what they are doing to help with the situation. It's very clear that there really still is not a plan in place to resolve the immigration issues we have along our borders. So we can argue all we want about who sent what buses where, but clearly we need to have a bigger conversation about what we're going to do about surging, you know, groups at the border, what we are going to do long term for immigration, how we're going to relieve the federal court system in order to get these cases, these asylum cases, through the system faster. I mean, really, we got to think long term, and we have yet to hear what that plan is from the Biden administration.
Yeah, and one of Biden's points was that Venezuelans specifically, who we've seen a lot in these border situations this year, are fleeing extreme strife, extreme poverty. And by the way, some of that poverty can be traced back to American sanctions. So they don't fall under some of these laws that allow them to be booted right back to Mexico. And in that sense, they are legally entitled to stay in this country, like it or not. Maria Villarreal, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
Next up on Start Here, one of the most dangerous moves by Russia yet may not involve weapons. We're back in a bit.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Bring them on.
If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place that's spectacular as well, me.
I think we might know a place, right, guys?
Bring your friends. Oh, wait, there is.
Good morning, America.
GMA, 7A, every day. Boom, boom, boom. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, America. How are you?
Boom. Now that's how you start your day, people.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Yes. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on the tough questions with straightforward reporting. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
Saturday, an ABC News live music event, Global Citizen Festival. With performances by the Jonas Brothers, Metallica, SZA, Usher, Thames, and Mariah Carey. With appearances by Hugh Jackman, Chris Martin, Billy Porter, Connie Britton, Rachel Brosnahan, and hosted by Denai Guerrera and Priyanka Chopra Jonas. United to change the world. Global Citizen Festival, Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern on ABC News Live.
ABC News, America's #1 news source.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our world is in big trouble.
Yesterday, the United Nations began its annual General Assembly, where leaders from around the globe gather in New York to address the most important issues facing the world.
Let's have no illusions. We are in rough seas. A winter of global discontent is on the horizon.
The Secretary General talked about the devastating starvation happening in Africa right now and how governments around the world seem paralyzed by their inability to harness action on climate change. President Biden will give his address today. He's expected to address those themes and also, of course, the ongoing invasion of Ukraine and what Russia's actions will mean for the rest of the world. And yesterday, Russia actually took some new actions that could escalate things even further. ABC's foreign correspondent Tom Sufi-Burge is in Kharkiv in the northeast of the country. And Tom, first off, Ukraine's continuing to push Russia out of some of these strongholds. The Ukrainian forces are moving in, and that means we're kind of just beginning to see what life was like for residents there, right?
Yeah, exactly, Brad. So we've been into areas of newly liberated territory. It took us about 3 hours to drive down there from Kharkiv city. And we went to a city called Izium, and it might be a name that's beginning to register with people right now. In the forest by the city, we visited what is a newly discovered mass burial site. And what the Ukrainian authorities have now been doing over the last few days, and we witnessed them working, these forensic teams in their white overalls, I mean, really digging with care down into the ground, into kind of sandy ground below this kind of pine forest, to dig up these bodies, remove them from the ground, exhume them, so that they can really identify the victims.
Sergei, you're from Izium?
Yeah.
That's your apartment building?
Yeah.
How many people were killed there?
We also met a guy called Sergei, living still in Izium. We met him by his apartment block, which was wrecked in a Russian missile strike. More than 40 of his friends and neighbours were killed during that attack, and most of them now buried in that burial site in the forest.
How did you feel?
I feel nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing. I feel nothing.
You're used to it after 6 months of war?
Was scary, was disappointed, but now empty. All tears fall down.
You've cried too much already.
You know, some of the people in this forest have died of natural causes. Now, they might have died prematurely because of lack of food, lack of water, lack of medicine in these Russian-occupied territories during the war. And more disturbingly, I think, is some of the victims being pulled out the ground, according to the Ukrainian officials, are showing signs of torture. We actually witnessed the investigators dig up one particular body. Now, it was quite grim to witness. I won't describe it in detail, but we could clearly see that it was a man and his hands were tied behind his back. And the lead investigator also called out some of his other findings, which also point possibly towards torture or at least the fact that this man died in a violent way.
Unreal. Well, so then you think about these towns who have been under Russian control for several months now, not weeks, but months. And does that help us explain what's happened in the last 24 hours? Because I heard Russia is now organizing referendums in some of the pockets of Ukraine where they do control. And these referendums would be like a vote, like, do you want to be part of Russia? To which I would have said, like, well, duh, these are going to be sham elections. I'm sure Russia's going to say, yep, everyone wants to be Russian now. Doesn't mean it's true. So, like, why was that announcement such a big deal?
I think it's a massive deal because I think we can talk about these referendums, and I'm pretty confident they will not be free and fair. These will not be a vote that will be recognized internationally.
These referenda are an affront to the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity that underpin the international system and that lie at the heart of the United Nations Charter.
But what Russia is now doing is the newly occupied territory in the south, so around a key city called Kherson, which they still occupy just north of Crimea, and then also in the eastern Donbass. I mean, a lot of that territory they have occupied since 2014 as well. And now we're effectively seeing Russia saying, okay, we're going to say that all of that territory in our command in the south and the east is actually Russia properly. We're going to officially recognize that that is Russian land.
Let me be clear. If this does transpire, and obviously it's not a done deal yet, but if this does transpire, the United States will never recognize Russia's claims to any purportedly annexed parts of Ukraine.
And the reason this matters is because in the war going forward, it raises the stakes a bit, and it raises the possibility that if Ukraine, with Western-supplied weapons, is attacking those territories, Russia might try and claim that that is a direct attack on Russia.
Oh, so now all of a sudden the response is as if they attacked St. Petersburg or if they attacked some border town in Russia. That's how they're going to react now.
I think that's the principle they're laying down in their rhetoric. Now, obviously, I think some analysts are already saying, well, wait a minute. And actually, you hear this from US officials already. They're saying, you know, this is grandstanding by the Russians. This is part of their information game, right? They're trying to raise the stakes. Putin's on the ropes and he's in trouble. He's being increasingly isolated internationally. At home, it's hard to read, right? Back in Russia, we don't know what public opinion's like. You know, clearly, you know, the media is very controlled. There's not, you know, freedom of expression, etc. Well, we're seeing, you know, for example, a mega-star Russian singer came out recently on Instagram and basically and really came out for the first time against the war. And that is a figure that really is massively popular amongst the generations, like someone who really stretches back to the older generations as well, who are traditionally quite sort of fans of Putin. So Putin's in trouble and he's in a corner, and now he's coming out with these kind of tactics to raise the stakes on the battlefield, and it feels like a slightly dangerous moment.
Right, stakes ratcheting up, and actually Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will give his speech to the UN today as well. We'll see what happens. Tom Sufi-Burge there in Kharkiv. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
I asked each of my parents the other day, do you think the next car you get is definitely going to be an electric? And they both immediately said yes. The only question, they said, was cost and whether they could reliably get from place to place on a full charge, whether they would need to find a bunch of chargers along the highway system.
The future of motoring is clean and green and probably electric.
And that's what's fascinating about electric cars. The most game-changing thing about Tesla has never been the car itself. Looks like a car. It's about the battery, its ability to harness electricity. If you really think about it, Tesla is not a car company, it's a battery company.
They will be for the cleaner cars of today and tomorrow.
In our renewable energy future, we're supposed to be free from fossil fuels. And yet, in our race to make batteries for our cars or the circuitry in our solar panels, we are already having to look for, wait for it, different types of fossil fuels, or should I say fossil minerals. Let's bring in ABC's chief meteorologist and the managing editor of our climate unit, Ginger Zee, who just hosted a full special on ABC News Live called Lit, America's Future. And Ginger, let's be clear, a little bit of these minerals goes a lot further than oil or coal, but this essentially has created a new mining industry, it sounds like.
Right. And right now, we don't make them in the United States. We have relied so heavily on China, Asia in general. But that isn't just for the minerals extracted from there and Africa. It is for the actual fabrication of it. And so if we want to be energy independent and we want to not rely on nickel from Russia, you know, in case a war breaks out, these are the real questions that we have to ask.
For our national and our economic security, we cannot afford to rely on countries such as Russia and China. It's clearly time for us to get serious about expanding domestic mineral production.
So in the lithium battery, and you've heard those because you hear it when a flight attendant or the gate agent says, if you have a lithium-ion battery, make sure you remove it, right? We know lithium is in all the batteries, in our phones, in our laptops, in some of those external battery packs. They're also in electric vehicles. It's not just lithium in there, though.
These are from Tesla?
These are from Tesla.
So that's what's lining under my Tesla battery?
Correct.
You have to, for the cathode of the battery, have cobalt, nickel, manganese, copper. A lot of other minerals go into those.
If you take a look around you, anything that is not grown was mined at one point in time.
So we have to go back to this practice that's thousands of years old, mining. It's something that we didn't stop doing everywhere, but a lot of times we did it really poorly. So I'll take you to the first cobalt mine in more than 30 years in the United States.
Nowadays, when we talk 50s and 60s, there wasn't that much regulation around it. The federal government actually asked for the mine to happen and produce. And so corners were cut to be able to produce that cobalt.
There's a reason we stopped mining it. It wasn't as valuable, but also it was because we really did it poorly. Right on the other side of the place I'm going to take you is one of the biggest mining blunders in all American history. It's called Blackbird.
Just a big machine went in there, turned the stream upside down, blocked the whole stream off to get those precious metals.
And it poisoned full rivers, killed salmon for decades on decades, and really impacted a lot of people in the Northern Rockies.
Hey, get your workout in.
Yeah, let's get those steps.
But let me tell you, that Blackbird site, it looks like what you think of mining, like hi-ho, like little tunnels, and then an open pit mine. The new mining of the future looks nothing like that.
We're using advanced tools like autonomous drones for surveying. So these kind of technological advances make a real difference in how we're able to, in a socially responsible way, extract minerals from the earth.
So it's way less invasive, way less impactful, and there are huge rules and laws now because, well, we learned a lot when we did it the bad way.
Huh. Ginger, I guess that's just so counterintuitive, because if anyone who's listening gives a flying flip about the environment, like we've been told all of our lives that drilling for fossil fuels is the way to screw this up. Like stripping the earth of what's underneath it has long-lasting ramifications. How could it possibly leave no trace? That's what they're claiming.
Yeah, right. And then you're not going to impact the earth. Of course, there will always be impacts. But to minimize that and then to utilize that rock and that mineral that is within that rock, it starts to make sense. A lot more sense than some of the other options.
I think it's a growing segment at the moment. This growth will happen and this transition will happen.
And then can we get to the volume that we need? Jervois, that new cobalt mine, says that they can produce 10% of the United States needs. 10%. That is a sliver. So this feels very far-fetched until you start thinking about deep sea mining. We have just started mining the deep sea. Go 15,000 feet down, and you'll find these little tangerine-sized, lumpy black rocks.
Inside there is everything you need to build an electric vehicle battery cathode. So it's full of nickel and cobalt and copper and manganese.
So these companies, like the Metals Company, which is one of the leaders in wanting to go and mine the deep sea, are saying, let's do this. We could be energy independent right now. There are millions of these nodules. Let's take them.
And we've identified 1.6 billion tons on 2 of our license areas. And that's enough to build around 280 million mid-sized EV batteries.
When you first look at that, you say, wow, yeah, it looks pretty innocuous. Nothing looks like it lives down there. 15,000 feet, what could be there? And that's the question, is environmentalists are saying, listen, this is a part of the world that is less explored than the face of Mars.
We should not go in and trash an area of the globe about which we know hardly anything until we've done the proper research.
This is not something where we should do what we've always done, go in and just start grabbing. Because when we've done that before, we see how that comes out. It's never good.
Which is why I've heard you say before, it is so important for us to find new ways to make cleaner energy. But since even the resources to make the super efficient batteries aren't unlimited, part of the answer in any scenario is going to involve humans just using less, like being less consumptive. Really interesting look at a complex topic. The special Lit, America's Future, is up on Hulu right now. Thanks, Ginger.
Thank you.
And one last thing. You ever make a big proposal at work, it gets accepted, and then you're like, oh wait, now that it's reality, I gotta do all this extra stuff. There's a lot of that energy at the U.S. Space Force right now.
It is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space.
In 2019, the Space Force officially became a branch of the U.S. military to defend American interests in space. Well, in 2020, the Space Force announced it had a motto, just like the other branches. This one was Semper Supra, always above.
The men and women of the United States Space Force will be known as Guardians.
In 2021, we got to look at their uniforms, but until yesterday, there was another thing our men and women in spacesuits didn't have, a catchy song. Whether you knew it or not, each branch of the armed forces has its own anthem. The Navy has Anchors Away, the Army has The Army Goes Rolling Along. Well, yesterday, 3 years after this branch's inception, the Defense Department premiered the new Space Force anthem. The lyrics call the Space Force the Guardians Beyond the Blue and the Invisible Front Line, which is kind of creepy, I guess. But the music was all arranged by Jamie Teachner, who's currently in the Air Force Academy Band, but was also a singer-songwriter who went multi-platinum before he joined the military.
It was quite a long work in progress for a while because I wanted to make sure that everything that was in the song would adequately represent all the capabilities that our Space Force is involved with.
However, as nice as the story is, the immediate reaction from some quarters was, that's it? Like all the other songs we've been talking about so far were written more than a century ago. This is Space Force, you guys. Where is our techno anthem? You know, you could start with some uns beats, you throw in some lasers, maybe even lay in a robot voice, talking about, we are the Space Force on the galactic race course. We go on awesome trips because our cars are rocket ships. Or something like that. I don't know. I'm not a songwriter, but you could get creative. Then again, maybe they remembered there is no sound where there's no oxygen. In space, no one can hear you sing. The Start Here DJ team is standing by, you guys. Imagine what we could do with 3 years and some Pentagon money. Like, we're available. Start Here tomorrow. Hit that follow button for new episodes every morning. I'm Brad Milkey. See you tomorrow.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted.